Hi guys, it's Sam with Spieler Custom Baits, and today we're going to be tying a football finesse jig. We're going to be starting off with a 3/8 ounce football jig. This is casted with the weed guard. So to get around this, what we're going to do is we're going to take a safety pin and pin that weed guard back so that we can get a good tie-in. This is going to be a tie with both silicone and with a very stiff rubber leg material. We're starting off with a 200 denier black thread, and we're just going to fill that in and go all the way up to the collar. Then we're going to cut off our tag end. We're going to be starting off with a green pumpkin skirting material. We're going to be using 2 tabs of this, one on the top and one on the bottom. I'm tying this in first so that the rubber legs will sit behind it, thus pushing it out a little bit more. We're going to put this right into our skirt hold, just so that we can get better positioning for our tie-in. Pulling it back to the length that I want it, and we're going to go ahead and tie that in on the back end of this jig. Once we have that tied in, we're going to go ahead and grab ourselves another tab of this, and we're going to put it on the top side. And we're just going to tie that in the same way, just being mindful of where we want that skirting material to come out at. So at this point I realized that I need to have my jig a little bit at a lower angle to make it easier with the tie-in, so that I'm not just hitting that weed guard over and over again. The angle that you have your jig at is sometimes very important when it comes to tying in skirting material. After this, I'm going to take 1 tab of black silicone. This is just to kind of fill out the jig and give it a little bit of a backdrop that the green pumpkin is going to be sitting over top of this black. So this just kind of gives it just a little bit better of a back end profile before tying in the black rubber legs. And now that I have this in the setting, what we're going to do is we're going to tie in some rubber legs. What I like to do is I like to cut them off into 3 or 4 strand pieces and then tie them in individually like that, just so that I can get a better coverage and position them the way that I want on the jig. start now. We're just going to be tying this in for position. But we're going to really put some torque on that later on to try to get it to flare out the best that we can against the jig head. With this thick rubber material, you have to kind of be careful that you don't put too much pressure on it, because it will cut through it. At the same time, you get a really nice flaring action from it because of the fact that it's so thick. Go on with our last strand here. Alright, now that we have that all tied in, we're going to go ahead and whip finish this a couple times just to keep it in position. I am going to be adding in a wire finish as well. I just find that it's easier to tie in with the regular 200 denier thread and then add a wire guard over it. Go in for a second one just to make sure that if the first knot just happens to slip, that there's something kind of backing that up and providing pretty good tension. Alright, put a little pressure on there, then we're going to go ahead and cut off our thread, and we're going to go ahead and grab us a piece of wire. Using 20 gauge wire here, and we're going to make sure that we get a good 4 to 5 wraps to go around that threading area. Just grab my wire cutters, and we're going to go ahead and get those wraps nice and evenly in there. Once we have our wraps in, I really want this pushed up against the collar of the jig to really help pronounce that flare out with the finesse style jig. The flare is really important for the action of the jig. Go ahead and get one more wrap in on this back side, just for some better coverage. And then we're going to go ahead and start twisting that in. Sorry for the camera angle here, wasn't paying attention while I was twisting this wire. And again, just kind of pushing up on the wire, making sure that's laying flush against the head of the jig. Then we're going to come in with some wire cutters, and about 3 wraps down we're going to go ahead and snip that, and then we're going to take our needle nose and bend that end back into the neck of the jig. Just take my needle nose and I just bend it up, and then once I have that, I take the flat ends and I kind of just push that back so that it fits in between the coils of one of the wraps. I find that this keeps it from having that little bit of metal material hanging out where it could cut either your line or it could cut some of your skirting material. We can go ahead and take the weed guard holder off, and then I'm just going to take this and I'm going to go through and individually pull the strands out on the rubber legging material on both the back and the front. When I'm doing this, I'm purposely pulling pretty hard and letting it snap back. A lot of times that'll let it resituate a little bit so that it's not all clumped together. Now we're going to do the same. Go ahead and cut our skirting material. And then we're going to do the same to the front. Again, with the rubber legs, really pulling and putting some tension on those just to kind of get them to separate out and get some even coverage. Sorry about the angle here again, but we're just repeating that process with the other tabs. And once we have that done, we're going to brush the front end of the skirt up, kind of pull back to where we want it, and we're going to go ahead and cut across. That gives it that real nice action on that front end. It's going to be pushing all that skirting material around and creating a lot of movement. I'm going to reposition this just so that I can get a better angle before we cut the tail end of the skirt. Looks like I missed one. Now we're going to pull that tail end back and we're going to cut the entirety of the skirting material to try to get it a little bit uniform there. As you can see, that rubber really gives it a different type of almost twitchy-like movement. And these jigs do really well on their own. They put off a lot of movement in the water. But where they really shine is when you add a trailer to them. Like here. Really bulks up the back end and gives it a little bit more movement to it. Thank you guys for watching.